They told her her skin was a weakness. They tried to silence her voice, erase her truth, and bury her name. But one woman refused to disappear. And her courage set a city on fire, changing the world forever. This is not just a story of injustice. It is a story of strength, of love, of the color they could not break. The air in Sathaya City smelled of rain and jasmine. The streets shimmered after the storm, reflecting the colors of neon lights and passing scooters. Naomi Mensah stepped out of the taxi and adjusted her scarf, her deep brown skin glowing softly under the street lamps. She had dreamed of this place. A new beginning, far from home, far from the expectations that had pressed against her for years. Thailand was supposed to be peace. Place to start over. Place where the past could not follow. But as Naomi walked through the glass doors of the news agency that had hired her, she felt something familiar. The quiet weight of eyes that watched but did not welcome. It was not the first time. Her boss, Mr. The One, greeted her politely, smiling a little too tight. "You are from Africa, yes? Ghana?" he asked, as though confirming something exotic rather than professional. "Yes," Naomi replied gently. "I worked at the Daily Heritage in Accra for 2 years." He nodded, but his eyes were already moving past her. He handed her a badge and gestured toward the empty desk in the corner, the one under the flickering light. "Your seat." That night, when Naomi unpacked her things in her small rented apartment, she stared out the window at the glowing skyline. She wanted to believe this was still her dream, that the whispers in the office, the glances, the small pauses were nothing. But she had seen those looks before. Across town, in a tall building filled with glass and silence, Elijah Carter stayed late in his office. His company had flown him in from the US to oversee a new tech project. He was good, better than most, but that was not what people saw. At lunch, the Thai engineers sat together. They spoke English perfectly but turned to Thai when he joined them. Sometimes they complimented his accent, sometimes his energy, but no one asked about his ideas. That evening, when the last of his team left, Elijah looked at his reflection in the window, the dark shape of a man standing against a city that seemed too bright for him. He wondered if he was invisible, or simply seen too much. A week later, their worlds crossed. Naomi was sent to cover a technology expo at the Sathaya Convention Hall, an event filled with bright screens, polished speeches, and the glitter of foreign investment. She arrived with her notepad, the only journalist from her agency who wasn't white or Thai. When she entered the press room, she saw Elijah standing near the stage, explaining his project to a crowd that barely listened. She watched as people nodded politely and drifted away. Something in her chest tightened. That quiet rejection, it had a sound. After the session, she walked up to him. "You speak like a man who has to repeat himself often," she said softly. Elijah looked at her, surprised, and then smiled for the first time that day. "You could say that," he replied. "You're a reporter." "Naomi Mensah, Sathaya Daily," she said, offering her hand. Their hands met, two strangers from different continents, bound by the same quiet understanding. They spoke for hours in the cafe outside the convention hall. They talked about work, about home, about what it meant to walk through a world that sometimes stared first and listened later. Naomi laughed for the first time in weeks. Elijah looked lighter too. But as they left the cafe, a security guard stopped them at the door. "Excuse me, can I see your passes?" he asked, eyes only on them, though dozens of others were walking out freely. Elijah raised his pass calmly. Naomi did the same. The guard checked for longer than necessary, then smiled awkwardly. "Sorry, just a procedure." They walked away in silence. "Still happens," Elijah murmured. Naomi nodded. "Everywhere. Just in different ways." When they reached the street corner, rain began to fall again. Gentle, warm, relentless. Naomi tilted her face to the sky, letting it wash away the day's heaviness. Elijah watched her and said quietly, "You think it will ever change?" She smiled faintly. "Maybe not fast," she said. "But every time we stand, we move the line a little further." The rain fell harder, the city glowing around them. Two figures walking through the storm, their reflections bright against the wet street. Neither of them knew that this night, this small meeting under the rain, would start something neither the city nor the world could ignore. The next morning, Sathaya City woke under a pale gray sky. The rain had stopped, but the scent of wet earth still lingered in the air. Heavy, grounding, alive. Naomi Mensah walked through the newsroom doors with her notebook in hand, feeling both tired and clear-headed. Her mind was still replaying the conversation from the night before. Elijah's quiet strength, his calm voice, the way he looked at the world as if it could still be repaired. She took her seat at her corner desk. The others barely looked up, typing and scrolling through their screens. But when she opened her inbox, she froze. There it was, a new message marked private. No name, no signature. Just a sentence that read, "They are using fake data in the environmental reports for the new tech district. Check the investor documents." Naomi's breath slowed. It was the same company Elijah worked for. She read the message again, her heart tightening. A story like this could be explosive, but it could also end careers. She had been in journalism long enough to know that truth came at a price. That afternoon, she found Elijah waiting outside her office building, holding 2 coffees. "You looked like someone who didn't sleep," he said gently. She smiled faintly. "You're not wrong." They walked together to the small park nearby, the one hidden between 2 tall buildings, where the sound of the city turned softer. Naomi handed him her phone, showing the anonymous email. Elijah read it in silence, then looked up slowly. "This is real," he said finally. "I've seen those numbers. Something's not right." Naomi leaned closer. "Can you prove it?" He hesitated. "Maybe. But if I try, I could lose my job." Naomi nodded. "And if I publish without proof, I lose mine." They sat in silence, the wind moving softly through the trees above them. 2 people caught between truth and survival. "I came here to build something honest," Elijah said at last. "And now I see that honesty has a cost." Naomi looked at him. "Then maybe it's time someone paid it." For a long time they said nothing more. But in that quiet, something shifted. A decision neither had spoken aloud, but both had made. That night, Elijah stayed late again at the office. The halls were empty, the hum of machines filling the silence. He moved quickly, copying files from his computer onto a small flash drive. Every click felt like thunder. He was not stealing. He was keeping the truth alive before it could be erased. When the elevator doors opened behind him, he froze. It was Mr. Hahn, his supervisor, a tall man with a smooth smile that never reached his eyes. "Elijah," Hahn said, walking closer. "Working late again?" "Yes," Elijah said quietly. "Just finishing reports." Hahn nodded, staring at the computer screen, then back at Elijah. "Good. Keep up the effort. We like loyal employees." The word lingered like smoke as Hahn left. Elijah exhaled slowly, heart pounding. By the time he stepped outside into the night air, his flash drive felt heavy in his pocket. He looked up at the skyline, lights glittering like watchful eyes, and whispered, "This is not just my fight anymore." The next day, Naomi received a small envelope under her door. Inside, wrapped in brown paper, was a USB stick and a note written in neat handwriting. "Use this carefully. The truth is inside. E." She turned it over in her hands, her pulse rising. When she plugged it into her laptop, the files opened. Pages of data, financial statements, reports, all proving the same thing. The new tech district project had falsified its environmental clearance. Dozens of poor neighborhoods were being quietly displaced. Naomi covered her mouth. It was bigger than she imagined. She leaned back in her chair and whispered to herself, "They will never believe me." Then she remembered Elijah's words in the rain. "Every time we stand, we move the line further." Her fear steadied. Her hands moved quickly, writing the headline that would change everything. "Exposed. The lies behind Sathaya's smart future." Before she hit publish, she hesitated for just a moment, then pressed enter. By dawn the story had spread. Screens across Sathaya flashed with the headline. Social media exploded. And somewhere across the city, Elijah looked at his phone, a small smile forming. But behind every truth, there is always a consequence waiting to rise. And for both of them, Naomi and Elijah, the storm was just beginning. By morning the city was awake with noise. Naomi's article had gone viral. Her phone buzzed non-stop, reporters calling, strangers praising, and critics accusing. At the newsroom, silence fell when she entered. Her boss looked pale. "Naomi, what have you done?" he whispered. "I told the truth," she said simply. Across town, Elijah's office was in chaos. His supervisor stormed in. "Who gave this information to the press?" Everyone looked around, and then at Elijah. He said nothing. But they could see it in his eyes. By noon Naomi was suspended. Elijah was fired. That evening they met again in the same cafe, the one where it all began. The rain fell outside, steady and soft. They said little. The weight of their choices filled the air between them. Finally Naomi spoke. "They can take our jobs," she said quietly. "But they cannot erase the truth." Elijah nodded. "Then we start again. Somewhere they cannot silence us." They looked at each other. Two people who had lost almost everything, but somehow still stood taller than before. Outside, lightning flashed across the Sathaya skyline, the city trembling, the truth refusing to die. The storm had passed, but the silence that followed was louder than thunder. Naomi stayed in her apartment, curtains drawn. Every few minutes, her phone lit up. New messages, threats, questions, warnings. Some called her brave. Others called her a liar. Elijah had vanished from his company's records overnight. No name, no trace, as if he had never worked there. But he was watching quietly, from the outside now, tracking every move of the people who had silenced him. Late one night Naomi's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. A voice whispered, "You do not know what you started." Then the line went dead. She sat still, her heart steady. Fear came, but so did resolve. She opened her laptop and typed, "If truth is dangerous, then silence is worse." Across town, Elijah sent her a message. "They erased me, but I still have more." That night, their names began to spread through corners of the internet. People they had never met began speaking for them, sharing their story, turning two voices into a movement. And for the first time, Sathaya City began to listen. Days passed, and the city began to hum with something new. A sound Naomi had never heard before. People were talking. Not about gossip, not about rumors, but about justice. Students protested outside the tech company's gates. Signs filled the streets with words like, "We see you," and "Truth has no color." Naomi watched from a distance, her heart pounding. She had never wanted fame, only fairness. Elijah moved through the crowd quietly, blending in. He had sent more evidence to journalists abroad. And now, the world was beginning to look at Sathaya. But the company fought back. Articles appeared calling Naomi a foreign agitator. Elijah was labeled a traitor to progress. They met again in a quiet alley behind the cafe. The same one that had once felt safe. "They are twisting our names," Elijah said. Naomi nodded, eyes steady. "Then we give them the truth again. Louder this time." Their voices had started something no one could stop. From whispers to headlines. From fear to fire. The city that once ignored them was finally learning how to listen. The air in Sathaya felt heavier now. The protests had quieted, but eyes were everywhere. Naomi noticed a car parked near her apartment every night. Different driver. Same car. She stopped sleeping by the window. Elijah had started using a new phone. His messages short and careful. He worked from cafes, never the same one twice. One evening, Naomi received an envelope with no name. Inside was a photo. Her and Elijah talking at the cafe. A note underneath. "Stop. Before it stops you." Her hands trembled for a second, then stilled. When she met Elijah that night, he had the same look in his eyes. "They are watching us," he said quietly. Naomi nodded. "Then let them see everything." They decided to record everything. Their calls, their files, their meetings. Not to hide but to protect the truth. The more they watched, the more the city began to wake. Truth had become dangerous, but silence had become impossible. Started before dawn. Naomi's article website crashed. Millions of views, then silence. The servers were wiped clean. At the same time, Elijah's apartment was searched. His files gone, his devices missing. No one claimed responsibility. But they both knew who it was. Naomi met Elijah in an empty subway station. Rainwater dripped from the ceiling. Their voices echoed softly. "They are trying to erase us," Elijah said. Naomi looked straight ahead. "Then we give them something they cannot delete." Together they uploaded everything. Every document, every message, every truth. To international news outlets. And then they waited. For a day nothing happened. The city moved on as if the truth had never existed. But then, screens flickered across Sathaya. A video appeared on every feed. Naomi's voice. Elijah's evidence. The full story, public and undeniable. People stopped in the streets to watch. And this time no one looked away. The storm they had feared had finally arrived. For the first time in months, Sathaya City was quiet. Not silent, just still. People spoke softly now. But their words carried truth. The company's executives were called to court. Government officials resigned. And on every news channel Naomi's face appeared. Not as a headline, but as a symbol. She stood outside the courthouse one morning. The sun touching her skin with warmth. Reporters crowded around. But she only said one line. "Truth does not need fame. It needs courage." Across the street, Elijah watched. His job was gone. His name still whispered in corners. But his eyes carried peace. That evening they met at the same cafe. The one where it had all begun. No guards, no fear, no rain this time. Just laughter. Naomi looked out the window, watching people walk freely under the lights. "Do you think they'll remember?" she asked. Elijah smiled. "They already do. They just do not know it yet." They sat in silence. Two people who had changed a city. By refusing to disappear. Outside, the night air was soft again, carrying the scent of jasmine. And something new. Months passed. The protests faded. The headlines changed. And the world, as it always did, moved on. Naomi now worked for a small human rights group, teaching young journalists how to find truth without fear. The office was small, but it felt like freedom. Elijah had started a community center in the old part of Sathaya, helping underprivileged youth learn technology and storytelling. He said, "If they learn to tell their own stories, no one can silence them again." But some nights, Naomi woke suddenly. The sound of sirens outside. The shadow of those old fears still flickering in her mind. She would step to the window, look out at the city lights, and remind herself they had survived. One evening Elijah called. His voice was calm, steady. "They are trying to pass a new law," he said. "One that protects whistleblowers. It might actually happen." Naomi smiled softly. "Maybe the world does change," she whispered. Just slowly. They did not see themselves as heroes, only as two voices that refused to stay quiet. And even as the world turned away again, their echoes stayed. In the city's corners. In the stories of others. In every person who finally believed that their voice could matter too. Began with a message. A journalist from Kenya wrote to Naomi, saying her story had inspired students to speak out against discrimination in their own universities. Then came another letter. From Brazil. Then France. Then South Africa. Each one carried the same line. "Your courage gave us permission." Naomi read them in silence. feeling both pride and weight in her chest. She had wanted the truth to live. And now, it was traveling farther than she ever imagined. Elijah watched news clips from around the world, seeing faces he did not know, chanting words that once belonged to him and Naomi. It was strange. Their fight had become everyone's fight. But not everyone celebrated. Powerful people in other nations began warning against outside influence. Some called Naomi a threat to order. Her inbox filled with both love and hatred. Late one night, she stood by her window again. The city lights shimmered like fireflies. Elijah's voice came through the phone. "They are afraid again," he said. Naomi smiled faintly. "Then it means the truth is still alive." And somewhere across the sea, a crowd gathered in the rain, holding candles, chanting her name. The world had changed, not completely, but enough to remind her that light travels farther than fear ever could. Years had passed. The city looked different now. Taller buildings, brighter screens, but the same heartbeat beneath it all. Naomi stepped off the train at Sathaya Central Station. The smell of rain and dust hitting her with memory. She had not been here in years. She had promised herself she would not return until she could walk freely. Now she could. Elijah met her outside the station. His hair was grayer, his smile slower. But his eyes were still the same. Steady, kind, unbroken. They walked through the streets together. Children were painting murals on the walls. Faces of heroes. Colors of hope. One of the murals showed a woman with brown skin. Is bright. A small caption below. Truth lives. Naomi stopped and stared for a long moment. Elijah looked at her. "Do you ever miss the quiet?" he asked. She shook her head. No. The quiet was never peace. It was fear pretending to be silence. That evening they sat by the river. The same water that once reflected chaos. Now calm, silver, endless. The city lights shimmered across the surface. Naomi whispered, "I thought I lost everything here." Elijah nodded. "But maybe you found what matters most. Yourself." The wind moved softly through the night. For the first time, Sathaya felt like home again. The years passed softly, like pages turning in a book no one wanted to end. Naomi's hair had streaks of silver now. Elijah walked with a cane, but his laugh still filled every room. They were no longer rebels or fugitives. They were teachers, mentors, stories. Every year, young journalists visited their small office. A humble place filled with photographs, old newspaper clippings, and a single framed line on the wall. Truth does not need fame. It needs courage. Naomi would sit by the window as students asked her questions. "Were you ever afraid?" one of them asked. She smiled gently. "Every single day. But fear only means the story matters." Elijah would add quietly, "Courage is not born loud. It grows in silence. And one day it speaks." Outside, Sathaya City continued to change. More voices, more faces. A new generation unafraid to be seen. At sunset, Naomi and Elijah walked to the riverside. The water shimmered gold. Children were laughing nearby, their skin glowing in every shade of light. Naomi whispered, "Do you think they'll remember us?" Elijah smiled. "They will not remember our names," he said softly. "But they will live in the world we helped build." The sun dipped below the skyline, and for a moment, the city glowed as if it, too, was finally free.